Perfection doesn't exist in powerlifting. Until now, I've built the ultimate powerlifting creation made from the best parts of the best lifters in the world, and trust me, this monster would be unbeatable. So my creation is made up of 12 categories. I have squat strength, squat depth, bench off the chest, bench lockout, deadlift off the ground, deadlift lockout, grip, grind, clutch execution, mentality, resilience, and finally a very important mystery category that I'll be revealing at the end. Okay, starting off with squat strength, this one is self-explanatory. Squat is going to make up the majority or a big part of the total, so we need someone who has all the strength in the world, and I'm going to pick Jesus Olivares. Now, I'm looking at all these categories in terms of relative strength, not necessarily absolute strength, but I still think Jesus is the best squatter in the world right now. So here is his best ever squatting competition, 478 kilos, 1,054 pounds. He's obviously a super heavyweight in the 120 plus category. And there are some other strong squatters I considered for this. You have Austin Perkins, Ross Lawhy, Jamal Royster. But I ended up going with Jesus purely because who else would you want apart from the guy who can squat the most weight on planet Earth right now? He has also done some crazy rep work in the gym recently, repping over 400 kilos and 900 pounds. Here is him doing 425 kilos, 937 pounds for a working set of 4 reps. Absolutely ridiculous. I know Ray Williams is still around, but I genuinely think Jesus has got the biggest squat on the planet right now. Okay, the next one is squat depth. So it's no use having a huge squat if you can't reliably hit depth. I'm not saying that Jesus can't, but who can we pick from active crop of powerlifters who most reliably absolutely buries their squats without question every single time? Bob Matthews. Bob Matthews is someone who absolutely buries his squats and leaves it to no doubt to the judges and takes it out of the jury's hands. Here he is squatting 360 kilos, 794 pounds, the most he's done in competition. He's a 120 kilo lifter. And you can see there, even from that angle, which is probably the worst one to judge depth of, you can see he absolutely buried that. Here's a side view of his squats. This isn't all that heavy relative to what he's been able to do in the gym. So a relatively light working set, but you can see that that is absolutely beyond question that he is hitting depth right there. And with the squat strength of Jesus Olivares combined with the depth of Bob Matthews, we are off to a fantastic start with the squats for our perfect powerlifting creation. Okay, onto the bench press. So bench off the chest. We need someone who can absolutely explode that bar off their chest. Who is that? Devin Williams. Devin Williams is another 120 kilo lifter who was a former world record holder in the 120s for the bench. You can see him here pressing 265.5, 585 pounds. And he absolutely blows it up off the chest and sort of catches it and ends up fighting slightly to lock it out. In the gym, this is the most he's done, 270 kilos, just 5 pounds short of the magical 600, and he absolutely flies off the chest, and again, a bit of a fight to lock it out there. But that is exactly the pressing power we need off the chest if we want to be creating the perfect powerlifter. However, we need to combine it with a solid bench lockout. It's all well and good blowing it up off the chest, but if you can't lock it out, it's obviously not a good lift. So who can we take for bench lockout? Well, this one for me was an easy one. Eddie Berglund, the man whose bench used to solely consist of just a lockout back before the elbow depth rule came into place. So he's a 66 or 74 lifter now. Here he is pressing 212.5, which was the world record in the 74s at the time, and that it was post the elbow depth rule. And you can see it was quite a quick, snappy lockout there. However, Eddie Berglund is most famous for his kind of meme bench presses where the bar moved about an inch or so. So he has pressed in the 66s, he still has the world record at 213, I believe, in a full meet, and he's pressed up to 221 in a bench only meet. And the most he's done in training is his 235 kilos, weighing only 67 at the time, 518 pounds, absolutely crazy. You can see there that is obviously not a bench press by the current elbow depth standards that we now have in the sport, It is purely a lockout, but that's exactly what we're taking from him, is that bench press lockout. And say what you want about that lift, but that is still a 67 kilo human being locking out 235 kilos raw. That is over 3.5 times body weight on a raw bench lockout, I should say. So imagine taking Devon Williams' power off the chest and combining it with Eddie Berglund's ability to lock out monstrous weights. You have a huge bench, and at this point, an absolutely monstrous subtotal. Okay, but going to the final lift, we need someone who has the most explosive deadlift and ridiculous ability to break the ground on deadlifts in the world. And again, there are quite a few contenders I was looking out for this, but the one that I'm going with is Enahoro Asine. That's right, the Miracle Man, the guy who will load up any ridiculous number he needs to try and pull for the win. And more often than not, he will break it off the floor, regardless of how ridiculous that number is. So most famous example of this, at 2024 Worlds, he loaded up 405 kilos. Keep in mind, Enahoro is an 83 lifter. Here he is attempting 405, 893 pounds. Now granted, he didn't go very far with it, but he got it entirely off the ground. Now there are a number of other lifters who are, potentially snappier off the floor with successful lifts. This is Enahoro's 380 kilo world record, the most he's ever successfully pulled in competition, 838 pounds. You can see they pops off the floor pretty well. But like I said, there are some other lifters like Joshua Ngoka absolutely flies pulls off the floor. But in terms of absolute ridiculous ability to budge weights off the ground, no one in my opinion comes close to Enah. I mean, who else is moving over 400 kilos as an 83 off the floor? Nobody. That is how strong Enahoro is. And he's done that multiple times too. This year's Worlds, I should say, he had 2 deadlift attempts over 400 kilos. I believe 402.5 was the heaviest of them, and I'm pretty sure from memory he budged both of them off the ground as well. Obviously he couldn't quite lock them out, but that is the perfect quality we want in our perfect powerlifter, is Enah's ability to pull ridiculous weights off the ground and get them moving off the ground. But unlike Enahoro's lifts, we need to combine that with a successful deadlift lockout in order for it to count. Now, I will say this one was the hardest category for me to pick, because I couldn't really think of any elite level lifter right now who has a trademark of a quick, snappy, easy, and most importantly, reliable deadlift lockout. Because a lot of the top lifters in the world today, when you actually look at them, they fail the majority of their deadlifts right around lockout. That tends to be the common sticking point, and a lot of the best lifters are missing lifts at lockout. So it was pretty hard for me to find someone, but I did, and it's someone who you wouldn't classically associate as a deadlift specialist or someone who's particularly good at deadlifting. But that is another 83 lifter, Jurins Kengamu. Now Jurins has a very underrated deadlift. He's pulled 360 kilos at World Games, 794 pounds, so just shy of the magical 800 pounds. You can see him pull it here, and he sort of eases off the ground, and once he gets above the knees, that's a pretty smooth lockout for an 83 with damn near 800 pounds. And the thing with Jurins is not only the strength of that lockout, but the reliability of that lockout. Jurins, especially recently, has had a very great hit rate when it comes to deadlifts. He doesn't miss very often, and when he does, it's not usually at lockout, because he's one of the few lifters who never has issues in terms of judging with the lockouts and the stand that he's able to lock it out to. He's someone who always has his shoulders back, always has his knees locked out, his hips are fully through, and that is pretty rare because, like I said, a lot of top lifters are getting red lights for at least one of those things. Here is a great view to demonstrate what I mean. This is him doing 352.5 at the silent worker meet last week. Pretty easy third attempt, and you can see there, snappy lockout, an absolutely undeniable standard there. Shoulders, hips, knees, everything fully locked out, fully through, and 3 white lights. No reason for the jury to get involved, and that is a pretty rare quality when it comes to elite powerlifters nowadays, considering how many red lights we see given for deadlift lockouts, especially lately. So yeah, imagine taking Enah's pop off the floor and combining it with Jurins' flawlessly consistent lockout. Now we've truly got a monster total. But it's not all about the strengths of the lift themselves. We also have grip, which is an important part of the deadlift. right? We know plenty of top level lifters who have all the strength in the world who just can't quite seem to reliably and consistently hold on to those top end deadlifts. So the grip that I'm taking is that of Nonso Chinye. Who better to take than the guy who has held on to the heaviest tested deadlift of all time? 415 kilos is what he's done, 916 pounds, which is, like I said, the heaviest tested deadlift of all time. He's a 120 kilo lifter, and the grip was absolutely rock solid with that pull. He's also someone who has attempted 400 plus multiple times. He's missed it a couple of times. However, none of those misses were on grip, and even more impressively, he has managed to hold on as he's been grinding through and attempting to grind through lifts in excess of 400 kilos. So here is his deadlift attempt for the win at Worlds this year. This is 400 kilos on the bar, a weight he had done previously, and you can see that he just gets stuck at lockout and he grinds through it. He attempts to grind through it, can't quite get it. It was a no lift. However, his grip never gave out that whole time. In fact, the opposite happened, where his grip, when he wanted it to, wouldn't even give out, and he struggled to let go of the bar because his fingers in his hands were cramping up, which is what you see there. So if anything, Nonso's grip is too strong because he doesn't allow him to let go of that bar when he needs to. But yeah, Nonso Chinye is someone whose grip has been rock solid with the largest amount of weight. So combining that with the previous two deadlift attributes we talked about, we have an absolutely invincible pull in our perfect powerlifter. Okay, but it's not all about the big three lifts. We've got the squat, bench, and deadlift sorted, but there are some other qualities that I think are important when it comes to creating the perfect athlete and the perfect lifter. The first of those is the ability to grind. Now, our lifter is already going to be the strongest period with how we've set up the attributes so far, but we still need them to be able to grind out those maximal lifts and to show that heart on the platform. And you know who this is going to be. It is, of course, Pana Taranides, the king of the grind. This guy has the most famous grinds in all of powerlifting on every single lift, the squat, bench, and the deadlift. He's a 66 lifter, moved up to the 74s now. But you can see he's famous for his bench grinds as well as the other two lifts, but bench is probably the biggest example. Here he is grinding at 172.5 as a 66, and he locks it out 12 seconds later, and that isn't even the only time he's ever done that. There are multiple examples I could show you of Pana grinding out ridiculous bench presses, both on the platform and in the gym. Same thing on deadlifts. Here he is deadlifting 290 kilos, the most he's ever done in competition as a 66, and again he goes through about 3 different sticking points before he eventually stands up with it, and that is what the majority of his deadlifts look like. You know, as the famous saying goes, Pana is often seen grinding out in the warm-up room before stepping out onto the platform for his opener, and combined with the absolute insane attributes we've put together so far, the ability to grind will mean that our perfect powerlifting creation is going to be shifting some absolutely unfathomable weights on each of those lifts. Okay, cool. So he can grind, but we need him to also be able to execute when it matters. This is a quality that's sort of independent of, physical strength and attributes, and it's more of a mental thing, right? It's the ability to be clutch and perform when you need it the most, to execute when the pressure's at its highest and most people crumble. You need to be able to step up and do what it takes to win. Now, there's not going to be any close rival to this perfect powerlifter we're putting together, but still, we need him to be able to execute on the platform when it matters in the biggest of stages. And the lifter that encapsulates that the best, again, a pretty obvious one, Jonathan Kaiko. They don't call him Mr. Perfect for nothing. He more often than not goes 9 for 9, and in the most battle-tested of divisions, the 93s, which have been crazy stacked, Jonathan Kaiko more often than not is the guy that comes out on top. And a large part of that is due to his huge bench press, which is a crazy weapon. There he is benching 246, 542 pounds. He very rarely misses bench presses, and he takes world records like they're nothing. He did actually miss a third attempt bench press at Worlds this year, but that wasn't necessarily his best competition. He actually went 7 for 9, which by his standards is a pretty bad day. So it was a bit of an off meet. But at PNS this year, he came up against the strongest flight of 93s the world has ever seen. A 900 plus kilo Brandon Petrie and Dominic Fuqua, a Gavin Aiden who came very close to totaling 920, a Demetrius Smith who came very close to hitting 900s as well, and he came out on top. 357.5 was his final deadlift for a PB there. He totaled 919.5 and 9 for 9 clinched his spot at Worlds. Jonathan Kaiko is the epitome of executing when it matters most. Like I said, he had an off meet at Worlds in his last performance, but he has largely been flawless throughout his career. In fact, since 2019, which was the first year he sort of became the top 93 in the world, he has competed 12 times, so he has had 108 lift attempts, and he has made 101 of them. He's only missed 7 lifts in the 12 competitions he's had since 2019. That is a ridiculous hit rate, and you will not find a better one amongst top level powerlifters in the world right now. Okay, so mentality. Now this is separate to clutch execution, because I'm talking someone who has the mentality to just chase greatness, right? Again, there are so many lifters in the world who are crazy strong and who can execute on the day, but there is just something to be said about having the mentality of being the guy who wants to go out there and make it absolutely undisputable that you are the best in the world, chasing competition, chasing challenges, and believing in yourself when no one else does. That is what I mean by the mentality category. And the lifter that I'm picking is Joe Borenstein. Joe Borenstein is someone who has taken the powerlifting world by storm in the last year or so, and he's someone who famously said 860 wasn't enough, right? That is in reference to Russell Lawhy, who made his return to powerlifting at last year's Nationals in 2024 and totaled 860, which at the time was the biggest 83 total we'd ever seen by almost 20 kilos. Joey B, at the time a junior powerlifter, a 74, who was moving up to the 83s, said 860 wasn't enough. He's calling out the GOAT of the division and one of the GOATs of the sport. And as a junior lifter who hasn't even stepped foot in the weight class yet at that point in time, he was saying he was going to beat Russ's mark of 860. What does he go and do? He beats Russ's mark of 860 in his first full competition as an 83. He did compete at junior nats, but he injured himself, so I'm not counting that. In his first full pro meet as an 83, he totaled 865 kilos in the 83 kilo weight class, 1,907 pounds, which was the unofficial world record, the biggest 83 kilo total we'd ever seen. And just like it predicted, 860 wasn't enough. So this junior lifter who had just stepped foot in the weight class called his shot against the biggest lifter ever in that weight class and the strongest ever and one of the biggest stars of the sport, and he hit and he executed when it mattered. Then he said shortly thereafter that he thinks 900 is going to happen. He called his shot again, and this time he chased 900 kilos. Now keep in mind, he had the biggest 83 total in the world ever at that point with 865. And here he is just adding another 35 kilos to that and rounding up to the nearest whole number and saying, I'm going for that magical 900. 900 had not even been talked about by an 83 before. Like I said, we just recently entered into the 860s after being stuck around 840 for the last half decade, with Russ being the best lifter around that mark for that long. Joey B, again, still a junior, still relatively fresh in the upper echelons of powerlifting, calling his shot at 900 kilos. Now what does he go and do? A few weeks later, at the start of 2025, he totals 900 kilos in the gym. But now the question becomes, can he execute that on the platform? It's one thing to do it in the gym, it's another thing to do it on the platform, and it's also another thing entirely to not just do it on the platform, any platform, but do it at PA Nats 2025, where Joey B was going to attempt to clinch his spot to Worlds against the strongest lineup of 83s we had ever seen at a single meet. I'm talking the strongest version of Taylor Atwood, one of the greatest powerlifters, if not the greatest of all time, two-time world champion, former world record holder Delaney Wallace, a rejuvenated Sean Noriega, Ange Fortino, Chris Perez, the strongest 83 kilo lineup of all time. And Joey B said going in that he has no issue executing and he will be going for 900. He will be towing 900. Again, absolutely crazy because, like I said, doing it in the gym, doing it at any meet, and then doing it at the most competitive meet against the best in the world are three completely different levels, and Joey B once again called his shot to do it at the highest level against the best in the world. And what does he do? He executes. He totals 900 kilos at PA Nats, beating out the strongest host of 83s we've ever seen. There is his magical final pull that he did. 900 kilos, 1,984 pounds, the biggest 83 kilo total of all time. He has since beaten that by 4 kilos at Evankus Houston, but still, that insane moment where he totaled 900, I don't think anyone was predicting that he would be able to do it on that platform against those guys when the stakes were that high, but he went out and did it. And then he went on to win Worlds this year, beating out Duran Zanade, and he pushed Perk. Well, he came kind of close to beating out Perk at Evankus Houston, and pulled for the win there as well. But yeah, Joey B has an absolute elite level mentality. He's not afraid to back himself, and he can prove it when it counts. Okay, now we have resilience. This is an important one because as strong and as perfect as a powerlifter is, there will always come times in powerlifters' careers when something goes wrong. Be that an injury, be that circumstances outside of your control. It cannot be smooth sailing every time. That's not just in powerlifting, that's in any sport and just in life in general, right? So we need to have a quality of resilience. Our perfect powerlifter needs to be able to bounce back from challenges and overcome them and come back stronger and better and keep pushing through. Who is the best example of that? Again, another super easy one, Rondell Hunt, the man who was banned from powerlifting for no fault of his own for like 7 years, not able to compete internationally despite being far and away the strongest in his weight class in the 120s. I've spoken about this so many times, the biggest tragedy in the sport of powerlifting due to political issues in his Fed, and then IPF banning him for him trying to compete elsewhere because he couldn't compete there because of the political issues in his Fed. It would have been so easy for Rondell to just give up and say, you know what, the universe has it out for me. I'm just not supposed to be this. It's a sign. I'm just going to quit, right? But instead, what does he do? Instead, he keeps training, keeps building, and keeps building his case as the strongest raw powerlifter potentially of all time. 425 kilo deadlift is arguably the biggest single lift he's ever done and most impressive, 937 pounds. And that would be the biggest raw tested pull of all time if he does it in competition. And not only on the deadlift, but he's been building up crazy lifts on the squat and the bench press as well. And it has paid off because he's finally been able to compete at an IPF sanctioned event. This is bench only, so he hasn't quite made it back to full meets yet. He will finally next year. But in bench only, here he is breaking Devin Williams' record that I showed you earlier by half a kilo. 266 kilos, 586 pounds is now the bench press world record in the 120s. And Rondell Hunt finally, after years and years of not being able to, officially has an IPF world record to his name. It is about damn time. And the resilience has paid off, the patience has paid off, the resolve has paid off, because he's now back competing in the IPF. He's finally been able to, his ban is finally being lifted, the ban that he shouldn't have got in the first place. His national federation is finally, finally back on to where it should be, and we're going to see him absolutely destroy the powerlifting world in the next year, and I cannot wait to see it. That is exactly the resilience that the perfect powerlifter needs. Okay, so I promised that I would show you a mystery category at the end, and this is a very important one. The perfect powerlifter would not be complete without this, and that category is hair. And of course, who has the best hair in powerlifting? Taylor Atwood. That's right, this is the finishing touch to our perfect powerlifter. We're going to give it the hair of the GOAT. Taylor Atwood, I had to put someone on this list, and what else could I put him for than the hair? Of course, he has a bunch of other categories that I could have put him into for this, but we are taking the magical hairline, the greatest style in powerlifting, never a strand out of place, and that is that of Taylor Atwood. So that is the finishing touch. We have just created the perfect powerlifter who will be absolutely unbeatable on the platform and annihilate every single world record and take every championship and every title and never ever lose. The perfect powerlifter. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you think that you would have picked other people in different categories, let me know. There are a few close ones in there. But yes, this is without a doubt the greatest powerlifting creation of all time.